Olá, sou a Mariana Alvim, bem-vindos ao Vale a Pena, o meu podcast onde conhecemos as pessoas enquanto leitores, com o apoio da WUC, a maior livraria online portuguesa. Fiquem por aí, vale a pena.
Deepti Kapoor is an Indian author and journalist, was born in Moradabad, northern India, lived in Delhi and Goa and currently lives in Portugal.
Yeah, in Lisbon, in Anjos actually.
In Lisbon. How long have you been here?
This is my 5th year.
Oh, so we can do this interview in Portuguese.
No, in very basic Portuguese, and then it'll just be the most boring interview you've ever done.
I'll do my best with my English, my rusty English.
Your English is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So graduated in journalism and has a master's degree in social psychology. Your first novel, A Bad Character, was published in 2015. 256 pages.
Yeah.
I'm saying this on purpose because we're going to get there and you like big books. Poor girl meets rich boy. They both want to break free of tradition. He introduces her to an India she never knew existed. You want to talk a little about this, your first book?
Yeah, I mean, Bad Character is a coming-of-age novel of a young woman who lives in New Delhi, and she has a sort of very protected existence. Her mother is dead, her father is away, and she meets a young man who shows her the city, but he also shows her more transgressive way of life. He introduces her to music, art, and cinema, and culture, and then he dies. And we know this because it's in the style of the novel.
You're not spoiling.
No, it's the so it's basically an exploration of desire and sex and drugs and trauma in Delhi. But it's all told from the point of view of a single character.
Okay, A Bad Character. We're going to wait for its translation into Portuguese.
Yeah.
Now, this year you published Age of Ice. It's already translated, A Idade do Vício. It's gripping, you know when you're starving and you eat too fast and you regret it because you didn't enjoy the meal. Someone said that to read it slowly, to enjoy, and I agree, because I did it the other way. I did it too fast because at a fast pace, because I wanted to finish it before I met you. So now I say everybody, please read slower because you really have to enjoy. Congratulations, it's a great book.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. That's a great compliment. So thank you.
It is. And I'm glad I loved it.
Otherwise, it's an awkward interview. Right?
Yeah, I would have to. So tell me a little about this book.
So, Age of Ice is a novel about the mafia in India, in northern India. It's a novel about power and corruption and the abuse of power, and it starts off with a car crash on a cold and wintry New Delhi night in 2003. A car crash that kills 5 people on the road, 5 pavement dwellers, and then we jump back in time to delve into 3 characters who were involved in the crash. So there is Sunny Vadia, who is the only son and heir to one of the most powerful, wealthy businessman gangsters of North India, who dreams of moving away from his father. There is Ajay, his loyal servant with a tragic past.
He's my favorite character.
Yeah, and you're not alone. And then there's Neda, who is a young, curious, and a little bit naive journalist who falls into Sunny's extravagant lifestyle. And as the story unfolds, you see how the lives, the dreams and ambitions of all 3 characters take them to a point of no return. So that's one way of saying it. And then it's also about this big Vadia family, their relationships, their dealings, how they control this world in North India. They have their hands in every pie, from like liquor to manufacturing. It's a novel about India post the 90s, where we transitioned from a socialist economy to a neoliberal capitalist one, and the kind of gangster and crony capitalism that came into play. Some very astute people realized how to make money in this new world.
And created empires.
Yeah, and also the changes in society, this changes in people, in the economy, and
the consequences.
And it's also a good old-fashioned kind of, sort of love story, but also a story about gangsters, and so it's I sometimes think of it as a masala novel, and masala basically means spices in India, where when we make Indian food, you always have it's called a masala dan. You have a box of spices. So if you're making, say, a chicken curry, or you're not going to use one spice, you're going to use 8 or 9. So in the same way, a masala novel will have a little bit of everything. It'll have some humor, some intrigue, some drama, some thrills, and it'll also be serious. So it's a little bit of everything.
And it's good to enjoy slowly.
Yes, absolutely.
The delicious
Take
curry.
your time. Yeah.
Take your time enjoying the curry. It was an Oprah daily pick. Wow.
No. It was a Good Morning America pick for GMA book club pick for January. I think Oprah picked it as one of the novels that it was a recommendation. Okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah, daily pick, not for her book club, but a daily pick.
So that's correct. You're right. Yeah.
It was an Oprah daily pick for this year, which is great. And I have to quote the great Stephen King. He said, "Future writers, read Age of Ice. The narrative is clean. Each word counts. The story is unputdownable. This is how it's done exactly right."
Yeah, this was amazing. I was I was thrilled and so happy when it first came out as he tweeted about it. So it was very unexpected.
It was totally surprise for you.
So normally when your publishers pre-publication, they send the manuscript out to bigger writers to get you some buzz. And, we had Lee Child and Marlon James and Flynn Berry, but, Stephen King is, of course, the king. Yeah. And then randomly, the novel had already been out maybe a month in America, and it was a Sunday morning and I was hungover.
Good for you.
And it was that Sunday where I had decided I'm not going to I'm going to fast, I'm not going to drink. And I'm going to have a digital detox, right?
Okay.
So I had put everything off, and I was like, I wasn't in a great mood, as you can imagine. And I literally put my phone on, and there were messages from old friends saying, "Did you see the Stephen King quote?" And I was like, what? And then I saw it, and I was just like, oh my God, that hangover disappeared instantly.
Of course.
Yeah, it was great. It was very nice.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. So it's honest, it's sad, it's tiring, it's gripping. It has treason and romance and violence. It's part thriller, part family saga. So Age of Ice, A Idade do Vício. I totally recommend you reading this book. So I'm really honored to have you here today in my podcast. I'm a new fan.
It's a real privilege to be here.
So now I would like to know you as a reader. So how can you manage to... The book is huge, and I realize you like big books also.
But I do like reading small novels. I've been reading Annie Ernaux the last few weeks, and it's great because her small
Annie,
books...
it's the Little Life.
No, Annie Ernaux is Simple Passion, and a man's... she won the Nobel. Annie Ernaux.
Yeah.
I know, yeah. and she's great because her books... she's also great, but her books are so slim, so you can read them in an afternoon, and I do adore that feeling of being able to finish something. My reading habits are... I read... a lot. I read everything I can find. I have certain, of course, interests, and some things I read for work. So I read a lot of nonfiction, mostly in Indian nonfiction, relationship between, say, crime and politics, prison memoirs. I'll read Human Rights Watch reports. I'll read lots of academic papers. So that kind of reading I do, especially when I'm working and writing. I write very early in the morning. So I write from 5 to 9, and then I spend the rest of the day thinking, walking, taking baths. I read a lot when I'm in the bath.
Can you manage to do that? I thought that was only in the movies. I tried to do that once.
Did you drop your Kindle?
Almost. I was afraid, to put the pages wet or ruin my Kindle. Exactly.
No. I never take an e-reader into the bath.
Yeah, but the paperback, yes.
Yeah. But I find that that sense of being in a space where you are completely cut off. It's this a small kind of like a space where you can just focus on one thing. It's very intense. And we don't have baths in India because I lived in Goa just before I moved here. And of course, Goa is hot and tropical. and you're not going to be getting into a bath. You just have a quick shower. So that actually happened in Lisbon. And I find it's a great time to really read novels. And
with a glass of wine next to you or not?
Yes, occasionally.
It has to.
Yeah, wine, tea, coffee, but yeah, wine is always nice. Yeah.
And doesn't the bath? I tried to do that also, taking a bath reading, and I was always afraid of getting the pages wet. And I tried with a glass of wine, but it was not very comfortable. It was not very practical.
Yeah.
And then the other disadvantage. It was that the bath turned cold.
Yeah, that's one of the. Sometimes I'm just say I just if the book is really gripping, I'm in the cold bath.
Yeah,
because then as soon as you step out, you're back in the world, and then there's other commitments or things to do suddenly, and
Yeah, you get out of you come back from the journey. Yeah,
there's life that suddenly you have to go and live in the real world.
Yeah.
So that bath is a space of
and you can always put the hot water again.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of your favorites, and it said it was difficult. Of course, I asked for 3-4 favorites. Of course, it's difficult, but you loved Roberto Bolaño. 2666.
Yeah. So I, whenever I think of books that I love, I always think of where I read them because I have such strong memories of the book, especially the place where I read it, the time in my life where I read it. And Bolaño was, I read Bolaño when I was living in Goa and, already working and thinking as a novelist. So this was, I think, in my mid-30s. And I remember thinking that, you've read all kinds of styles of novels, pretty much, there's satire and, capers and all kinds of different thrillers. You think, okay, I've seen it all. And then Bolaño comes along and 2666, which is this completely unconventional, strange and thrilling novel. It's also massive. It's actually 900 pages.
Yeah,
and it's 5 different stories, 5 sections that are all combined to make the whole. And it's also, he died before it was published, and when he died it was just basically left on his desk, and there was a decision to publish it as a whole novel, but it could also come in separate sections.
He said that he wanted to be in 5 separate sections.
Yeah,
but he wasn't here to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the publishers asked his family, and they agreed.
Okay.
And it starts off with these 4 academics who are obsessed with this one particular writer who's a complete recluse. And then it sort of pivots in the second part to this border town, I think. That's the second part, right? Because
Amalfinato, it's a widow and his beautiful teenage daughter, Rose.
And then it goes to Santa Teresa, which is
in
Mexico, it's a border town. And then it suddenly goes to the section that everyone says this is what the novel is about, because it's about this very dry retelling of all these crimes against women in Mexico, in this border town. And then finally in the last section you actually get to know about this writer. And it's interesting because it almost feels like a mystery. What is this novel about? I mean, apart from the fact that, he does completely, it's narratively, characterization, everything is not what you expect, but it's propulsive. You read it with this idea of, what's going to happen next.
It's a page turner.
Yeah, but also it's almost like there's 5 planets orbiting the sun, or, orbiting a black hole, and there's a mystery at the heart of the novel, and you don't actually ever know what this mystery is about. It's almost like it rewards rereading in different times of my life. In fact, this has been a great to speak with you because it brought me back to Bolaño. 2666 was been lying in my bookshelf, and I hadn't read it in years, and now I've gone back to it because I was thinking about it, and so this is going to be my another reading, and then I think I'm going to read it again in a few years, because every time you read it, something else will happen. You'll figure something else out, and And I love novels like that. I love novels which are unconventional, which are mysterious. And I think it's like it feels like a novel about the world, about what's good. And at the center of this world is violence. And that brings me to the fact that it has a lot of parallels with India and the work I do, which is I write about India, I write about violence, I write about, caste inequality, about wealth, extreme wealth, about capitalism, So in a way, it I feel like it hasn't, because 266 is so capacious, it can integrate everything. That has also influenced the way I approached Age of Ice, where I thought it's a novel that starts off as one thing, but then it pivots and it moves. So it's all encompassing, and that was a big influence on me.
Wow, and we have it also in Portuguese. 2666, Roberto Bolaño. He was a poet, and he wanted only to be a poet, but once he became a father, he had to provide for his family. Yeah. So he only wrote fiction in order to, pay the bills.
Wow, I didn't know that. I was reading about him, and he does. I know that he died very, he was young, 50 when he died. He had some liver problems, and I know he lived away from Chile for years. So, it's just, his work is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny. It's curious. He's an author, a brilliant author. 2666 is not his only book, but he still considered himself until the end as a poet. He was born in Chile, yes, in Santiago de Chile, but he died in Barcelona at the age of 50. Liver problems, but traceable to heroin use.
Oh, well, and also I think because he died before the publication of 2666, writers can, I can explain my work, but he could never explain his work. So it's again something that you have to just figure out.
Yeah,
it has something quite, it has like the occult in it, without it being cliched. There's something like this is dark magic,
a mystery that you're never going to solve.
Yeah,
and you know that he died in 2003, and in 2009, a number of unpublished novels were discovered among his papers.
Yeah,
so there's more mystery coming.
I know.
We hope.
Can't wait.
Another book you loved, Secondhand Time, Svetlana Alexievich. We also have that in Portuguese, O Fim do Homem Soviético. 700 pages. That's why I said you love big books.
Well, yeah, but there's a couple of books that are not so big. Yeah. Okay, so again, Svetlana Alexievich's Secondhand Time she's a Belarusian writer and journalist, and it's this polyphonic, multi-voiced piece of work, which is again it's based on interviews with hundreds of people that she made in the former Soviet Union, from countries like Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and she combines all these voices, all these people's thoughts and desires into this work, which is again really powerful because it's this transition that she's talking about, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the birth of all these different countries, especially Russia. And what's so fascinating, it's like a history of emotions, but it's also fascinating to see this hold that an all-encompassing ideology has on people's lives, a kind of life where ideology dictates every aspect of your life and of your thinking, and that to me was again very interesting in terms of how I approach my own work, because even though I'm writing fiction, I read lots of academic papers and journalistic accounts where, again, people are talking to other people, so you have voices. And when I make interviews myself, it allowed me to say, you have to trust the idiosyncrasies of speech. And how do you find sometimes the voices of people when they're describing something that happened to them or their feelings in the aftermath of a certain incident, they are more powerful than what you can ever imagine and write about. So how do you integrate that into your own narrative? And I think she did it brilliantly. And, a big inspiration. Also, India had its own sort of socialist economy, a state in the 90s that collapsed and was replaced by a neoliberal capitalist one. So again, we had in not maybe so as radical a transition as Russia did, but we had our own transition. We had our own kind of different world emerging. So again, I see that parallel. So this is the kind of work that I think about because I think about India, and I can use it and I can think about it, and it leads me to be a better novelist.
Yeah, and making the characters real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give them life.
Yeah.
You had a writer, I interviewed Isabella Figueiredo, Portuguese writer, beautiful writer. Mm-hmm. And she also picked this author, Svetlana. She won the Nobel Prize in 2015. And she chose another of her books, Voices from Chernobyl, As Vozes de Chernobyl, also translated, because she's known for being a journalist, an investigative journalist. She interviews the witnesses that were there, and even doctors and victims and firemen.
And through that, she creates this history of this big cataclysmic event that then leads to other changes. Yeah, it's. I have that book too. I've been reading it on and off, but for me, Secondhand Time is very seminal. But yeah, it's. I'm glad someone else chose her as well because she's brilliant. Yeah.
Secondhand Time, O Fim do Homem Soviético. And you said, when you chose this book, you said, in the shadow of the brothers Karamazov, os irmãos Karamazov, do Dostoiévski, it's also translated. Why do you say in the shadow of? Because it's different, the story is different?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of Dostoiévski because, again, you said only 3 books, but...
Okay, I turned it into 4 because I picked this one up also.
Okay. I read Brothers Karamazov very long back, so it's difficult for me to talk about it. But what I can, again, it's just the world he creates. It's so intense, the characters, the writing. I mean, it's brilliant. But I remember reading it when I was...
More than 1,000 pages? Go on.
Okay. Just as... it's a classic in the way that you have to just basically engage with the classics in a very intense way. I don't know if I could read it in the same way now because of all the distractions we have. But when I was reading it, I was, again, living in Goa where, I had a very non-internet, non-social media existence, at least for the first half of my life in Goa. And we had you have 6-month monsoons. You have in Goa, it's a tropics.
The rain, yeah.
You have 6 months of rain, 6 months of heat. So in the rain, you can't do much because it's raining about sometimes, non-stop all week, and you can just hear the sound of the rain on your rooftop. It's very and then sometimes the electricity goes out for hours, so you just have to deal with it. You deal with whatever groceries you have at home and you cook from what you have. So reading Brothers Karamazov in that time, I remember just sitting in bed and reading it non-stop for a week because I couldn't do anything else, and it was such a intensely profound experience that for me it was just the experience itself was so intense and powerful. And I think of Russia and Russian literature and of course the war right now, and there's a lot of rethinking about the Russian greats as well. There's a whole debate going on about who you should read, or you should at least read Dostoiévski or Pushkin or whoever in the light of the idea that there is an imperial sort of power, and these were writers who were writing about imperial Russia. So it's interesting, this debate, and I think it's very important. And that's why I like Secondhand Time, but I always think about, Russia when I'm reading that as well.
Okay, so Secondhand Time from Svetlana Alexievich and the brothers Karamazov from Dostoiévski. Sigmund Freud said this is the most magnificent novel ever written.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And that makes me...
Wow. No.
I think I'm in good company, right?
Exactly.
Along with millions of other people. I think that.
It's about a father with 3 boys and their half-brother, and the plot revolves around the subject of patricide. It's father or stepfather murder. So once again, Dostoiévski makes you think about, like the other, like Crime and Punishment or...
Yeah.
So the brothers Karamazov, it's 12 books within the book.
Yeah.
That's why 1,050 pages. So the last book you chose for this conversation from Paul Bowles, The Sheltering Sky. We also have it translated, O Céu que nos protege. Tell me about it.
Okay, so Sheltering Sky is interesting because, you always have to have one book that you read, that you read when you were younger, that had a massive impact on you. And for me, that was Sheltering Sky. Now, when I was growing up in school, we were only exposed to the classics mostly. And there was, we had a very colonial education in India. So that was Dickens or, Thomas Hardy, or you had Indian writers like Salman Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh. And, while they're all amazing, I never really picked up a piece of work that spoke to me in a way that was, transgressive, transformational. And in my mid-20s, I was working as a journalist in Delhi, and I changed my life around. I burnt out quite early, and I moved to Goa and started to practice and then teach yoga. And this is when I started to just read for myself and read for pleasure, but also just try to think that maybe I can write this way. And this is when I read Sheltering Sky, and it just blew me away because it is this strange, transgressive piece of work that it starts off, you have these, an American couple who are traveling in North Africa, and, it's again, it's very, I think I'm attracted to work that's like a little mysterious, and it's about what happens to them. And, I'm going to give it away. The protagonist, who is Port, dies 2/3 of the way through.
Don't spoil it.
and then that would normally be the end of the novel.
Story.
Yeah, the story. But he went on and he talked about that, Paul Bowles. He said that he wasn't done. And then you suddenly pivot to Kit's story.
Yeah, the wife.
Yeah, and then again, it's interesting because even though now I feel like Sheltering Sky has reached the end of its shelf life for me, like I don't need to read it again, but I did reread it many times. And you can read it from Port's point of view, the man. And then the next time you can read it because then you understand it's really about Kit, and then you can read it from her point of view. So I like this idea where the characters have ambiguous intentions. So you don't know necessarily what's going on. And every time you read it, it's a different kind of reading. And some of my favorite pieces of work are this film, In the Mood for Love, is also this film by Wong Kar-wai, which is set in Hong Kong in the 60s, where you have the two protagonists who are sort of in love. They're married to different people. But again, I have watched that film from the man's point of view, and then I've watched it again from her point of view, and I had completely different readings.
What's the name? I'm going to write it down. What's the name of the movie?
It's called In the Mood for Love. And again, it'll have a Portuguese translation that I won't know about. In fact, it was being shown at the Media Cinema in Imaginem in last year. And I was very upset because, of course, it's Portuguese subtitles. So, but so I couldn't watch it because I need English subtitles. But I think I watched it so many times, I can probably just go and see the film with my rudimentary Portuguese.
I know, you're starting to speak Portuguese.
Yeah, I can read. Yeah.
Great, that's great. In the Mood for Love. The Sheltering Sky, back to this book. It's also, there's a movie about it. John Malkovich and Deborah Winger.
Yeah, and it's directed by Bertolucci. But it is, the book is way, way better.
Always.
No, but I think sometimes books are, make really great films. But I think books that are incredible, and they're just, it's about language and style, it's harder to film. And I think, I was reading this yesterday, Paul Bowles famously said about the film that how can you make a film about something when all the action is taking place inside people's heads?
Exactly.
So
that's why it's always better.
Yeah. And this is a book which is really something to be savored and read slowly.
Yeah, so it's a sophisticated American couple that goes through Algeria and, to try to sort things out between them. And they respond to things in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's and you know, Paul Bowles, the author, he began writing in Fez in 1948, apparently fueled by a cocktail of hashish and majoun, which is a cannabis jam. So he finished the book while moving around Morocco and Algeria, where the protagonists go, setting the path himself that his doomed characters would take.
Yeah, in fact, he said, I think that he would write every day about, at least the setting would be exactly the way he had experienced that day.
And
So,
he was Port or Kit?
Oh, he was sport.
Okay.
And Kit was based on his wife, Jane.
Okay,
Bowles,
how would she respond?
and who's also a novelist, and she wrote plays, and incredible. Her work is also incredible. And they both lived in Morocco for most of their lives, and you know, I think they were married, but you know, she had female lovers, he had male lovers, so they had a very open marriage, and he basically based Kit on her. So,
Okay, that's very important. Kids, The Sheltering Sky, O Céu que Nos Protege, do Paul Bowles. So, 2666 Bolaño, Secondhand Time, O Fim do Homem Soviético, da Svetlana Alexievich, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoiévski, Os Irmãos Karamazov. Everything has a translation, it's great. The Sheltering Sky, O Céu que Nos Protege, do Paul Bowles. Pick one. This is even harder.
No, I can't do that. This is crazy. I can't do that. No. Yeah. Okay, 2666.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It didn't take you long.
No. I'm trying to think of something. Because you asked me to pick one. Yeah. But you know, probably tomorrow I will be
Picking another.
Yeah.
And you'll choose other 4 books to talk about.
Absolutely.
Of course. So Indiana, I always recommend a few readings. I bet you know these, but of course I had to mention Shantaram.
Yeah.
You've read it?
Yes, I read it years back.
Okay.
Yeah. It was when I was a journalist, and I even managed to get an interview with Gregory David Robert. I remember I was in Bombay. I wanted him to write for a magazine I was editing, but I couldn't afford him.
Oh, of course.
He was very expensive.
He's on a machine now, of course.
Yeah.
She writes beautifully. I'm a total fan. It was the book I most underlined.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And another book, of course, you know it probably also, Behind the Beautiful Forevers.
Yeah.
Catherine Boo.
It's a great book. It's excellent. It's a non-fiction account of a writer who lives in a slum in Bombay and the life in the slum. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, she was a journalist that went to live there on purpose to write about this. And the slum at the edge of Bombay airport in the shadow of new luxury hotels. So their garbage was the slum's food.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I had a guest, Catarina Furtado. She mentions this book. So, Behind the Beautiful Forevers, O Sonho de uma Outra Vida. It's also translated, and Shantaram, I mentioned it several times in this podcast. You should read it also. So, my gift to you, it's a surprise, I also give you a book at the end of our conversation. So, I wouldn't risk, I knew you probably had read Shantaram and Behind the Beautiful Forevers. So, going back to Bolaño, and it was actually the book you chose, in the book 2666, he writes, only poetry isn't shit. So, do you like poetry?
I do, but I don't read as much poetry as I read prose. Yeah.
Yeah, so same here.
But I do.
Okay, so I brought you a classic. So it's Luís de Camões is our poet.
Yes, of course.
Love sonnets in English.
Oh, wow. No, this is perfect. Thank you. Oh,
okay.
Nice. Thank you. This is perfect.
And going back to your Age of Ice, which I loved, the only complaint that I have, it's with a trilogy. So when's next?
I'm going to go back home and start working on it immediately.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
It was a real pleasure. Great
Thank
talk.
you.
Thank you.